Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're back to another edition of the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective of the classics from a fresh point of view. Appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today, yours truly is myself, B. Cox. With me, I have the crew comprised of these fine gentlemen here. To my left, we have my boy, Dominique Marks, a.k.a. Cousin Damo. He is the host of the Raw Sex Podcast. You can hear it on Podbean, also on Spotify, and also on Apple Podcasts as well. More distribution channels to come. To my right, we have my man, DET Dave, here in front of us. He is the host of the Ground Rule Double podcast that he hosts every Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. or so about the parts. Check your local listings, and of course, make sure you check him out on Facebook to see when it's airing. He does that on Friday and Monday evenings, talking everything in the world of sports. And in front of me to my 12, I have my boy, J.O. Jason, a fine connoisseur of hip-hop, of everything from the West Coast to the East Coast to down South and everything in between. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming back with us. We've been away for a long time.
Yes, indeed.
We should have left you without a dope podcast to step to, but we are right here back in the place to be. And I'm glad to be back here now because, of course, as you know, on the Vault Podcast, we review classic albums and do a perspective on them from 20, 25, and 30 years after their release to see if they still stand the test of time. And we have a good one today, going back 20 years to the year of 1999 and looking to see, as we did research on this, to see how dope the end of the century, last century was in 1999, the projects that we have reviewed in the past and are also reviewing today. We're going to go back to 1999 to Internal Affairs by Pharoahe Monch. Of course, good old Pharaoh, the rapper from Queens, one half of the duo Organized Confusion along with Prince Poe, with his solo debut, Internal Affairs, released in 1999. So here's the particulars, gentlemen, what we have. We are pretty much right on the cusp of the 20th anniversary of Internal Affairs, released October 19th, 1999, recorded between 98 and 99, runtime of 53 minutes and 22 seconds. Label, the iconic, short-lived, but still iconic, Rawkus Records, also through Priority. Executive producers, of course, Renee John Sandy II and Pharoahe Monch, who took a big creative role with this. And also other producers were Lee Stone, who did quite a bit of work on this album. Other producers on this album were also DJ Scratch, The Alchemist, Diamond D, and then also a host of feature artists who were on this album, this debut of Pharoahe Monch. So, guys, we're going to go into this. And everyone who's known and followed Pharoahe in his career through what he did with Organized Confusion definitely developed himself as an elite lyricist in the 90s, well respected amongst a lot of people in the industry for his wordplay. And that was, I would say, very well in effect and also prevalent in this release that he had his first solo offering. We're going to get things started off. Internal Affairs, of course, leased it. And now it's also some interesting news. For the longest while, this album was not made available. It was actually out of print and also not available online because after Universal Music Group acquired Rawkus from Priority, there were a couple of artists that had opportunities to be able to continue recording either with Universal or through a number of different other record labels. And Pharoahe refused to record for Geffen Records afterwards. So as a result of that dispute, this album was out of print and was also not made available in most digital formats where you can buy or listen to or stream albums. And it was just announced about a couple of weeks ago that Pharoahe actually made the album and it reached a deal. The album is now available on Apple Music and most other digital formats. It was always available on YouTube, and now you can download it and stream it as well. So that's a good thing because I'm glad that people are finally going to be able to discover this digitally. So Internal Affairs, released in 1999, 53 minutes, 22 seconds, and 15 tracks here that we had for Internal Affairs. So we're going to get the reviews for this. This is 20 years ago. We'll go ahead and start. I'll actually start to my left, and we'll start with Damo about his reaction to this album. Basically, your first reactions listening to it and what you thought about the album. I don't know if you may have listened to it just more recently or you listened to it back then, but this your reactions to it.
Well, back then, I remember PJ, our boy PJ, hyping this album back then. So he had me ready for this album. So I went and grabbed it, listened to it. I loved it back then. I really enjoyed it then. Of course, you know, Simon Says was the jump back then, so I was on that. When I walked in, you know, Jason said it was nothing to jump back into it. Once I threw it on, it was just like back then. I was like, oh yeah, dang, I forgot about this a little bit until I saw, you know, when Brian was like, hey, look up Eternal Fest, that sound familiar to me. When I saw the picture, I was like, oh yeah, this the jump right here. So it still give me the same feeling. 99, Bowie High School.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful time.
So Jay, your reaction saying that it wasn't hard for you to get back in at all. Why?
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, because I'm thinking about when it came out. I was actually my freshman year at Lincoln University in PA, so I was around a lot of like New Yorkers and hardcore hip hop heads. Like this is like the end of the century, like you were saying. But when I first heard it, I mean, it was just what I expected from Pharoahe Monch. It was already like a hype that he was going to do his solo release on Ruckus Records, and it was even more of a treat that he was doing. Like he was going to have so much creative control, but I mean, he just brought it like with the production and the way his flow was. It just really like lived up to the overall mission what Ruckus Records was trying to do, keep underground hip hop alive and carve out that niche. So
exactly,
I was definitely surprised, and like I said, it'd have been a while since I listened to it because, like you were saying, like you kind of forget about these artists, and I don't know how I did this with Ruckus Records artists, but yeah, they kind of got to get cast to the wayside. So when I bump it again, like it's like.
I think because their demise came out of nowhere. You thought they was going to have a run.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost like it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But you look back, and now when Ruckus folded, it's been almost 15 plus years now, almost 10, close to 10 to 15 years since they've been gone. And God, what a glorious roster they had and a glorious time it was. That record label put out some consistent classics, and their mission was clear in helping to keep the underground alive.
I thought Ruckus was going to be like how good music is. Well, how good music was looking like it was going to be in the beginning.
Yeah. How good music
good music is still putting out projects, but them first couple of albums like Common and that's how I looked at how Ruckus was going to be.
Yeah. Dave, your initial reaction upon hearing it, and then getting back into it now, listening to this week, what your reactions were.
Again, this is one of those albums that you hear a single, you heard Simon Says all over the radio, then I heard The Light, and then I heard the remix of Simon Says. And I'm like, wow. Like I think with this point it disappointed me because I remember what Kweli said, like Ruckus was like, fuck the radio till Pharoahe said, get the fuck up, right? So it was like I was disappointed to hear that he got so much radio play and he had all these mainstream artists on his remix, but it's just like, you know what, everybody needs to hear about this dude. So I mean, listening to the album all the way through, I didn't listen to the album all the way through. This is the first time I did it, and I did it this morning, as a matter of fact. So it's still fresh on the mind, but yeah, it was quintessential Ruckus. Ruckus.
And a lot of people, up until they heard Simon Says, in the public abroad had not heard of or known who Pharoahe Monch was, which is really disappointing considering how dope he's been. My reaction back then was that I was finally glad to hear a Pharoahe solo record. Now, I got much respect for Prince Poe and what Organized Confusion did as a duo, but I wanted to hear Pharoahe, especially when you've heard guest appearances on things that he had done and random freestyles you would hear he'd do on Hot 97 or Power 105 or so many different other freestyles you would hear back in the day. When hearing freestyles back then were rare, and then just being able to hear them on the internet when they just wrapped up and did a freestyle on a radio show. For me, listening to it 20 years ago, we had our lunch table crew, and Dave wasn't necessarily a part of the first lunch table crew, but he became a part of it in our senior year within our senior lounge, where it was that Tuesday date when you had releases come out. Wednesday. This album came out on a Tuesday on the 19th of October, the week before Most Def Black on Both Sides. It came out. So you had 2 back-to-back weeks where we were sitting there having long discussions at our lunch table about this album. And we love the fact that, you know, a lot of our favorites during this time were on this album. You had MCs like Cannabis, who at that time hadn't completely lost his credibility and was still somewhat of a phenomenon. You know, even after he lost his battle with LL, he still had skills, you know? You had M.O.P., Busta Rhymes, Common and Talib Kweli, and then of course the remix of Simon Says with Lady Luck, Method Man, Redman, Shabam Sadiq, and Busta as well. So
Second
you know,
collaboration with Busta.
They're gonna take Sadiq off.
Yeah, so so and then listening to it again, I actually told Jason when he walked through the door earlier, I listened to this like 3 times because I really had not pushed this album out of my consciousness, but when it came to other things that I've heard during that time period, it was in the back of my mind. So I had to listen to it 2 or 3 times to get back into it. I like to say this about Pharoahe. To me, I think he's a kind of like beer. And same meaning that he's like beer, like he's a bit of an acquired taste to the raw ear. If you haven't been used to what he, you know, used to him and his style, his flow, his delivery. But once it's either you get beer and you hate the taste of it, or you get it and then you, after a few times of drinking it, you love it. And to me, that's what it was with me with Pharoahe, especially being a writer, poetry and writing rhymes. After you sit down and break down, like using that ohhla.com and sitting there and reading those lyrics and you get those metaphors he was saying, like you didn't get it the first time around.
So get back with that one.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I still use that to this day, man, because sometimes you just need to be able to just break down lyrics when they meant something, you know? So that was my big thing. So we're going to go around our round table and talk about your highlights of the album and see what it is that you liked. And so I'll start now with Dave. What were your favorite tracks on the album? Just a few highlights of tracks that just kind of grabbed you and took a hold of you when you listened to it most recently.
Of course, Simon Says, The Light, The Truth with Common and Most. I mean, I'm saying Common and Kweli.
Yeah.
My favorite track on the joint is Official. That joint just swimming with punchlines.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
I will get into that in a little bit later as far as the quotable.
Yeah.
My quotable comes from that song, but
yeah.
Bro, that song is absolute fire.
Yeah, the thing about Official, what I loved is I didn't think it was possible to spit that many sports metaphors and references in one song, but he did it so skillfully in that song. The Truth is, you know, a great track as well with Common and Kweli. I had forgot about that track when I was listening to it again, and it was just like, oh yeah, this was close towards the end of the album. So yeah, man, I definitely understand that. Jay, your highlights of listening to it after listening to it for a while.
Of course, Simon Says, and particularly the remix, because I just feel everybody just brought it on that.
They had no choice.
Yeah, I mean, like you made no choice. Yeah, you had to step it up when you was with Pharoahe, and like,
yeah.
Another thing I want to say about the beat of it, you know, especially like, you know, the freestyle cipher days, like it was just understood. You had to go in there like with your heart of 16 and demolish that beat.
Absolutely.
Like I came in like a rabbit dog out of hell when it came to like, you know, just like spitting bars and off that joint. So it just took me back to that time. But so that's why Simon Says stood out. And I would say The Truth, Right Here, definitely Hell with Cannabis.
Yeah, and, that was.
Yeah, like, I mean, because Pharoahe he definitely matched Cannabis, because typically Cannabis outshined everybody he was with during that time. No Mercy with M.O.P.
Yeah, that was a good one
like,
too.
Because honestly, that, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but that was probably like the most lyrical I've ever heard Lil Fame spit.
Yeah.
So that just really stood out to me. Like,
no, absolutely, man. I definitely hear that, man. To mention also about Simon Says, everyone knows the famous sample that was used for that track was actually the sample from the Mothra versus Godzilla theme, that quick little 3-second sample that they used. And because of that, actually, they did not get clearance from the movie studio that did that. So that was another issue with this album being released, is the fact that there was not clearance in using that sample. And it's a shame, because that's one of the most inventive samples of such a short snippet that became one of the biggest bangers in that century. So it's crazy, man. But Damo, your highlights of the album after listening to it then and now?
Of course, it's the remix. Like you heard me whisper out here, they should have took Saddam off the jump. I didn't really like him.
Yes.
Oh wow, I really didn't like him on there like that, like everybody else. Like when I first heard Redman, I was like, oh yeah, Redman. I was like, oh, nothing. Oh. Even Lady Luck, I was like, okay. And him, I was like,
I ain't know who
I was
Lady
like,
Luck was.
okay, I don't know what, but and then Cannabis. I loved Cannabis on there.
Yeah.
And I forgot that he was even on the album. I was like, once I heard, I was like, oh, snap, he was on here?
Yeah.
You know, because you thought, you remember him dying back then, and you forgot he was still alive during this time. And then, The Light, of course. And it was good to hear Common and Talib Kweli on the joint. So, yeah, basically the same thing.
Yeah.
And I like the intro.
Yeah.
Yeah, the intro's fire.
The
Intro's fire.
I had to look. I said, hold on. Oh no, this is an intro for real.
Yeah. No, to tell you the truth, man, the production on this album was outstanding, and by many different producers who gave work and produced the work on this album. It was great. Thinking about that remix though, and Dave told me, he didn't even know who Lady Luck was. In that year, Lady Luck had two memorable features to help propel her into the consciousness. It was this remix, and it was also the Symphony remix that EPMD did on their album in 2000. Not back in business, but out of business. Yeah. So they actually, she killed it on that, and that's I think the first time that I had heard of her. And then on the remix, this was the second track that I heard, Lady Luck. Thinking about that, this is when the days when people used to go into the studio and rap together. Like you would go in the studio and put down a track. So if you step in this studio and you got Pharoahe, Method Man, Red, and then you, Lady Luck, and Shabam Sadiq and Busta Rhymes, like you got to make sure you bring your A game. It's like, you don't want to be the person on the starting five, that ends up getting, or the person who ends up being relegated to starting five, and you the first person off the bench. You don't want to be on the bench. You want to be on the starting five. My highlights on the album, to me, it's crazy because even though this is a controversial song topic, this concept of the song "Rape" to me was crazy. How he weaved his words around with that. Yeah, Hell with Cannabis was crazy because you had two very intricate wordsmiths on that album, him and Cannabis. And it's funny when you think about this. If there was ever a rapper that could have benefited from being on Rawkus and being in that atmosphere of likewise artists, and also from the production, because we know this was his biggest detriment, is his ability to having albums that had substandard production. It was Cannabis, man. Really.
Great minds think alike, bro. I'm just thinking that.
Yeah, The Light, and it's funny that he had a song here on Common that also had a song named The Light in an album that was released the next year, like Water for Chocolate, but that was one. The Truth, and then, that was good. And then, of course, the remix. There's a lot of different other things, but those are really my highlights after listening to it. But it was it's interesting though to look at this album and see the different type of, Diamond D produced about 4 tracks on here. DJ Scratch had a couple of offerings. Pharoahe actually helped co-produce a couple other tracks on here as well. Greta talked about the creative control that he had. Right. And that was the great thing about Rawkus, is they let their artists be involved in the producing of their albums. A good thing to see about that. So I guess we'll go and move on to Then and Now. Your favorite song then versus now. I'll go ahead and I guess I'll start with you, Jay. Back then and now, what was your favorite song then? Has it changed? And if it has, what was it then and what is it now?
Really can't say anything has changed too much, just because like everything, with the exception of one song, which is not whack, but I could have done without. And I don't mean to keep making it a theme here, but like, honestly, the one with Busta Rhymes, I could have done without that one, but
I got a different choice for that one.
The next shit.
I agree with you. That's 1A.
Yeah.
And the song wasn't whack, but I just felt it was out of place for Pharoahe's out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so, but as far as like songs stand out now, Queens, because of like the storytelling ability, it was just, because initially I just saw Queens and like, all right, he's going to shout out his borough, like different spots around his borough and everything like that. But then you listen to it, he gets into the aspect like telling stories and everything like that. It's like, okay, oh yeah, he's a dope storyteller too. Slept on songs just because the title, it made me uncomfortable back then, like Rape, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
the title, the
title, and even like the way he like starts the joint off, like pictures on the wall, following my balls, like, like you really think he's about to try like take you through the mind frame of like a rapist, like okay, oh dude, it's about to get real dark, like and then I listen to it some more, and he's like, no, like it's more metaphorical and everything like that, but of course that title catches your attention. I guess I could say I liked The Light back then just as much as I do now. Of course, like everybody's gonna say the remix of what Simon Says, that's just like top notch, you know what I mean? So those are mine.
Yeah. Damo, your favorite song then versus now, has it changed? If it has, what was it then? What is it now? And then any songs that you think you slept on then, but now you you paid a lot more attention to it this time around listening to it?
I'm gonna go right where he left off. Of course, Simon Says was the favorite song then. You know, especially the remix. And you know, back then, remix was the remix always was lit back then.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And now I would say I slept on Hell with Cannabis. I slept on that one. I think it was really underrated, and I think kind of had Cannabis underrated on there from some people. And that's about it for real. I listened to Rape a couple of times because the first time I listened to it, I was like, okay. Then I said, hold on, let me listen to it again. Like, oh, he talking about the game.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah, he's talking about the game. Yeah, exactly. Metaphorically, a great song to sort of go through. Yeah.
I mean, let's just hope this man doesn't end up on like Fox News for any type of topic because you know you're going to on that song. You feel
right.
me?
And that's the reason why when I saw that song title, it took me back. And I was like, whoa, was I looking at this song the same way back then, the way I look at it in the lens now?
Know, we was raunchy back then.
Yeah.
So, and the song I felt like that we could have been taken out was The Ass.
Oh, okay.
I was like, that had to be like a ruckus thing, put a label thing pushing. Like, let's just throw this in, get her out there so we can hit her voice out there. I was like,
okay, so I didn't look at it from that perspective, like, you know, trying to get her attention.
Yeah, but you know, I do like the way he started the song, though. Fuck it, I shagged her. Oh, man, that made me laugh when I heard that first line. Yeah, but Dave, so your favorite song, listening to it, I mean, then I know it may have been one song. Now, since you listened to it this morning, has that changed?
The remix Simon Says was my favorite back then. It's changed to Official.
Yeah.
Just like I said, me being a sports podcaster and being just a nut about sports, I'm listening to this song. I'm just like, wow. Everything he said, I was just like, man, he just ripping this joint like, just straight punchlines. It was absolute fire. It was, and the beat, the production was quality, and the hook was dope. Everything about the track was dope.
Yeah.
Songs I could have did without the ass, trash. And was that the new shit?
The next shit.
Yeah, because like for some reason he was on some like Pancho Villa type.
Yeah, I was like
just out of place.
I was like, this is not needed on this album.
Right.
Yeah,
those are the only two dark spots. The only two spots I could have done without. Like the ass was just, I'm like, okay, this is quintessential. You know, I guess they have to have this on every album back in the '90s. I mean, hell, I thought that was pointless.
Yeah,
and back. I'm sorry.
No, sure.
And it's more like every album back in like the late '90s had Busta Rhymes on it.
True.
Yeah,
and he was on that album twice.
Yeah, well, Busta was
he was on the street back then.
Busta was hot as fish grease back then, man. You got to think about the sequence of albums he put out in the late '90s. He had When Disaster Strikes, and then he also had Extinction Level Event. In the early 2000s is when he had Anarchy. Right. But you got to remember, he was doing a lot of guest spots back then. He had a lot of really, really successful commercial songs throughout both of those albums. He really was at that time. That was also when Busta had switched his flow up a little bit, so he was becoming a lot more commercially viable. And it was just a great thing to sort of have, to be able to have Busta on your track at that point. I mean, if you had Busta on a guest spot on your, it was never a bad thing. Especially in the late '90s, man. He was hot as fish grease back then because he was. Yeah. No, well, at least on the next shit, it wasn't that great. But he more than made up for it by closing out a remix. And when you close out a remix track on a all-star cast like that, it says something, you know? So,
Yep.
For me, my favorite song back then definitely was definitely Simon Says, the remix. It's still one of my favorites, but I would have to say my favorite now would have to be No Mercy, because I loved MOP. And, you know, you listen to MOP, you know exactly what it is you're listening to when you listen to MOP track, you know, and they've never not yelled on a track. Right. And when you listen to MOP, if you're an MOP fan, you're okay with it. But it was great. And that beat produced by The Alchemist. And this is when The Alchemist is really starting to make a name for himself.
Right. You can't miss with The Alchemist, bro.
You cannot.
At all. Nope.
And like you said, that to me was probably about as lyrically impressive as Lil Fame was. Billy's always been the one that's sort of been the heavy hitter on that one, right, especially because of his voice. But they really all three kind of brought it right there. As far as like songs that I slept on back then, I would have to say Official, without a shadow of a doubt. Official was one, and then also Hell featuring cannabis. Official, it's like I listened to Official and started thinking about the references he was naming, like people who you forgot about in sports. Like he was Chuck Knobloch's, Ray Ordonez, talking about George Steinbrenner. Then the way, Raul Mondesi. That's a throwback for those of us who used to watch baseball back in the 90s. Yeah. He was into sports. Like Raul was the shit. I mean, he was a perfectly balanced, almost 5'2" player, but great offensively and defensively, and the type of things that he sort of just weaved into those rhymes, and that hook was great.
Yeah, hook.
The ass, definitely. I think they could have done without it, but it's a label thing, and I'm pretty sure that they wanted to get, Apani P. Fly, who was the female artist on that track, was there. The next shit, like I said, my mind wandered off a little bit during that one because it's like I could have felt that it wasn't as strong as some of the other tracks, but those are my highlights there, and of course the songs that I slept on. This was a really, really well-reviewed album. I was going through some of the reviews earlier this week and getting prepared for this recording, and saw that, of course, by The Source, this had a 4.5 mic rating when it came out in 1999. Pretty much only a half mic away from it being in the Source's rating system a classic. RapReviews.com and Steve Flashwan, who is one of the most respected reviewers that I see out there, because I used to read all the stuff from OHHLA.com, and then they branched off that into RapReviews.com, gave it a 9-star rating and gave it a 9 for both lyrics or 10 for lyrics and a 9 for music as far as the music was concerned. All Music gave it a 4.5-star rating. Rolling Stone gave it a 4-star rating, and back then Rolling Stone wasn't as into rap music, I would say, as they are now. This is a very well-reviewed album, and a lot of it has to do, man, because I think the production was great, and I think with Rawkus at that point in time, they were really clicking on all cylinders with all the projects they were putting out. Like in that time frame between 1998 until like 2001, 2002, they were putting out albums, and they were not missing. It was hit after hit after hit after hit. And whether it was Kweli or Mos Def or Company Flow or High and Mighty,
Flow.
to the compilations, and to me, they were the kings in the late 90s, putting together compilation albums between Lyricist Lounge, Volumes 1 and 2s, definitely. And then Sound Bombings 1 and 2. Those are great memories that we kind of put together back then. So
we do not give credit to Lyricist Lounge Volume 2.
Yeah. And to me, I think it was a big deal putting out the first volume, because everybody heard about the Lyricist Lounge and the mutterings of rapping and articles in the Source and Vibe magazine about the actual place, the Lyricist Lounge in DC, in New York, that eventually spawned other counterparts in the West Coast and then also eventually down south. But it really did spark a movement. So we look at this, and as far as the beats, we talked about the beats here as well. Alchemist, DJ Scratch. To me, this was one of his better offerings with what he did with Right Here, and Diamond D, of course, with some good offerings here as well with The Light, and some of the samples that were used here. Other than we talked about the Simon Says sample, there were also samples of Aftermath for Behind Closed Door by Quincy Jones. Queens had Till the Cops Come Knocking by Maxwell. No Mercy had The Trap by Jerry Goldsmith. The Light had samples of both Mikosa by Wes Montgomery and In Summer Wishes, Winter Dreams by George Benson. So there were a lot of intricate sampling going on here with a lot of the different producers that worked on this album. So we've been through it. We've looked at our favorite tracks. We've talked about what it is that we liked then and now. Now, of course, we come in with the ultimate test, where we like to say, well, first, before we get to the ultimate test, we're going to go to notable quotables. All right, we all going to go to the lines that we like to hear. So I'm going to go around the table. We're going to talk about the quotable lines that you pulled here that you like. So I'll go ahead and start with Dave. Dave, you have one that you wanted to pull from it, at least one that really caught your ear when you heard it?
My style makes the crowd say, ow, like number 55 on the chart. I promise thee, I dodge a nigga like Raul Mondesi. Soberly stay calm, like by any means, like nature on. The bomb like Hail Marys infiltrated with napalm. Rap, please deliver scriptures similar to Jesus. If you couldn't catch if you were Yvonne Rodriguez.
Yeah. Bro. Being Pudge. Yvonne Rodriguez being Pudge. Yeah, like the sports references were crazy, and that's from Official, where Dave is saying, God, the sports references there were crazy, man. Like I had to think like how he would just, when he was sitting there writing that down, to be able to think about how he was going to be able to craft each of their names into this rhyme. It was crazy. So that's one. Jay, do you have one in particular that you liked?
Yeah, it would be off of Right Here.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a quick little bar when he was like just talking about how MCs can get ate by him. He was like, you can get ate like Mickey D's after the hydro if you push me. I'm just saying, because like
that's a line that I think we can all relate to a little bit.
Exactly, yeah. Because I mean, we've all had. I mean, especially us Morgan alums, we've had those nights where we've indulged in some of the hydro and had to run to that McDonald's.
McDonald's in Northwood parking lot.
Yes, it kind of gave me a flashback there, and then just kind of like piggybacking on what I said about Lil Fame, like on his track with them, and that was another thing. Like apparently, like typically when people work with MOP, that they'll go back and rewrite their verse. Pharoahe apparently just stood tall with his because he really brought on that song too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like when Lil Fame was like, and again with him being the most lyrical I ever heard him, he was like, my hammer's heavy and got kicked like Taekwondo. Yeah. And he was like, I'm gonna show you how to stretch a nigga if you want to watch Tybo. Like,
yeah. And Tybo was big back then. That was really when it was starting to make it like really big. Billy Blanks in his infomercials.
Stay up past 12 o'clock. You see that commercial. Yeah. Oh, you know it's time for bed.
Exactly.
Yeah, we see Billy Blanks. Time to go to bed, bro.
Night night.
Indeed. Damo, any of your quotables that you wanted to share that caught your ear?
The No Mercy. Pharoahe Monch caused damage. The advantage is we banish artists, labels, and managers. Amateurs found 6 feet deep in mental canisters. I said, good Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
He ain't playing on this one right here.
Yeah, now they all three of them brought it, man. You actually stole a little bit of my thunder, Damo, because that was actually my quotable from Pharoahe as well. And he just said, he started out, this is what you get when you fuck with the likes of the magnanimous flows of total assholes and ignoramuses. Mammal P / Pharoahe Monch caused damages. The advantages, we banish artists, labels, and managers. Amateurs found 6 feet deep in metal canisters. And that was just wild. And then my other quotable is actually from Kweli on The Truth. And it was like his first four bars or so, is that he said, on my neck, I still got marks from the nooses. The truth that produces fear that got niggas on the run like Carl Lewis. The truth is, my crew is the smoother bits of saliva juices like the roots is, more organic than acoustics. And if people don't catch that, what that line was, the Roots debut LP was actually Organics. Yep, Organics. So like the Roots is more organic than acoustics. Kweli had a few good lines in there. Kama had a lot of good lines. There's a ton of lines in here from Pharoahe that you got to really go back and read. Like, I think he was one of the few rappers that I would actually go up, like I said, on ohhla.com and go and read. And go and read some of those lyrics and try to get some of those references, man. And even some of them I didn't get until I listened to it and then went back and read again. But, tons of quotables, tons and tons of quotables. Anybody got any other quotables they want to share?
I gotta get back to the second verse of Official.
Okay.
Yo, the real and stuck females blosh my knob like Chuck. Dispense the 8 count. Commence the rebound like Buck Williams. Triple crown threat to score plus the bonus strange. Without the rover, more range than Ray O'Donnell.
Yeah. Now, those were some dope sports references. You think about Chuck Knobloch and then Ray Ordonez, shortstop, who, goodness, I'm trying to think about who Ray played for. Ray played for the Mets, for the White Sox, yeah. I had a feeling he played for the Mets too, didn't he?
Or he played for the Mets. Yeah, for the Mets. Played for the Mets. He played for the White Sox too.
Okay, yeah, but now the range that he had as shortstop was ridiculous, man. Him, I think about shortstops back in the day, especially in that part of the '90s. There were so many great shortstops. We think about defensive shortstops. Him, Omar Vizquel, were like great. Cal, of course.
Yeah,
at that point, Cal was like at the end of his career. But A-Rod, you think about Nomar, you think about Jeter, but when you think about defensive shortstops, it's almost like during that time, there weren't many better than Ray Ordonez and also
Chuck was second base.
Yeah.
Chuck was second base, that's right.
Yeah. So he couldn't throw the first base no more.
Yeah. So
the yips.
Yeah. But it was just crazy sports references on Official. So there we are with notable quotables, plenty of them that you can see there. So now we reach this point in our program where we go ahead and get the final verdict from you gentlemen after everything we've said is basically the test, the ultimate test. Is it a certified classic? It is a borderline classic, or just a classic in its time? So I'll go ahead and we'll start with Dave. What is it to you? Is it certified, borderline, or just in its time?
I give it certified.
Yeah.
Not, of course, you can have, well, there is such things as perfect albums, but, you know, I think if they had taken off the ass in the next level, in the next shit, you know, it'd been flawless. But, you know, I give them a pass, you know what I'm saying? But every other song on the joint bangs, so I give it a certified classic.
Jay, what say you?
Well, I'd make that too, man. I have to say it's a certified classic. I mean, just like with the production, the lyricism, how it just stood, how it's like a monument to like the overall mission of Ruckus as far as like keep it true to the underground and saying like, look, there's an audience for this here. You know, people want to hear this music.
Absolutely.
Especially and during that time, like late 90s, it was still kind of that the jiggy era was ending, but the bling era was coming in. So it kind of like it still carved out that niche. The overall mission of Ruckus and the way this album banged, with the exception of the 2 tracks, you know, Dave mentioned a moment ago. I'm not as tough on the song as he was, but like mine was like more so. I mean, not saying it was dope. I mean, like my attitude was that's like whatever, you know what I'm saying? Doesn't bang as hard. Might be like a little lounge club banger if he needed that. But I mean, with the exception of those 2, I mean, I would definitely say it just banged through and through.
Indeed. Damo, your verdict?
Be the bearer of bad news. I got to be 3 in a row. Gotcha. I thought I was about to say certified. Yeah, it's certified. You know, I'll listen a couple of songs you could take out, but it's still you don't take you back to like, dang, when was this made? I can't really listen to this. Right. It still relates today. It's the certified album.
Yeah. Make that 4 for 4. Certified classic, without a shadow of a doubt. It is a certified boom bap classic. If we're talking about what, you know, the type of album that it is. And it's interesting you said, Jay, about the late 90s and the period that was in. I was watching Hip Hop Evolution, and they were starting to talk about how after the deaths of Tupac and Biggie, how you saw the move with Rockefeller Records and then with Bad Boy. And then, as you said, the bling era was starting to come in because you had P and No Limit Records starting to encroach on territory. And then by the end of this century at this time, Cash Money is starting to make his entry into the market as well. And they introduced the bling, you know. So there was definitely a battle for the soul of hip hop during that particular time. And there were a couple of ends of spectrum that you were. It's either you're kind of like this side, jiggy, blingy, or you were more boom bop, underground, head nod type music, you know.
All day long.
And then there was also a spot in between that needed to be filled in as well, which I think that by the next decade, it was definitely a spot that was filled in for that void in between. So just a little bit to correct the references. So Ray Ordonez did play for the Mets, the Devil Rays, and the Cubs. This Maglio Ordonez played for the White Sox.
The White Sox, yeah.
So just the other Ordonez. I had to stop there and do. But Ray definitely was a defensive genius back then. Only 12 home runs, 287. Huh?
He wasn't a hitter.
He wasn't. Only 12 home runs, 246 career hitter, 287 runs batted in. But goodness, his glove was on point. He played from 96 to 2004. There we are. Yet another classic ran down. Internal Affairs by Pharoahe Monch, just made available on digital platforms this week on its 20th anniversary. Please make sure you go and check that out and go listen to this album if you haven't and refamiliarize yourself with this album and also with Pharoahe Monch. To me, one of the most criminally slept on lyricists of the 90s and going into this time. He's done a lot of music since then, but obviously has not been as well in the forefront because he's never been that kind of guy. But those who know hip-hop, know lyricist, know lyrics, know Pharoahe Monch. So Internal Affairs, please go make sure that you check it out. And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you check us out on our host Podbean, vaultcmr.podbean.com. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault CMR on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please make sure you listen. Also subscribe and share it to someone. We appreciate all the support. And if you have a friend, tell a friend. And if you have a friend, make sure you tell that friend to tell a friend. And for everyone, if you're in the DMV area and you are interested in recording a podcast, you can always come to those of us at IV Creative and come to see if what it will take to get your podcast on the air. We work from everyone from experienced podcasters to everyone looking to get started right out of the box. You can visit us on Facebook at IV Creative, also on Instagram at IVECRE8 on Instagram, and email us as well, IVECRE8@gmail.com. If you're interested in starting a podcast, we'd love to be able to work with you. And in the DMV, if you're around, we are mobile and do come to you. So also another quick shout out to the Raw Sex Podcast with my man Damo on Spotify, also on Apple Podcasts, and on Podbean as well. To my man D, of course, make sure y'all check out the Ground Rule Double podcast on Facebook. Check your local listings to see when that's available, Mondays and Friday evenings. And of course, a shout out to my man Jay. Appreciate his insight on hip hop as always. Want to close this out to always remind you to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. As we close, we like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.